The air in the cramped hallway behind the law school was suffocating. My stepmother cornered me, hissing I was ungrateful for refusing to sign the papers on my graduation day. When I said no a final time, she slammed me into the concrete and hit my ribs. I forced a smile, smoothing my gown. Inside, my fingers pressed the tiny recorder. Today, I thought, is the last day they will touch my money, or me, without paying the full price. It was graduation day, but for Catherine Wade, the air felt less like celebration and more like a vacuum chamber. I stood shivering slightly in the narrow, institutional hallway behind the main auditorium of Crescent Ridge Law School in Charlotte, North Carolina. My black graduation gown, heavy and stiff, was already clinging to my skin with nervous sweat. I clutched the mortarboard cap in my hands, its hard corner digging reassuringly into my palm. I was just 20-something years old, ready to become an attorney. But right now, I felt like that vulnerable 16-year-old girl again. The only other person in this concrete choke point was the woman who had spent the last decade perfecting the art of emotional and financial asphyxiation, Monica Pierce, my stepmother. She was dressed impeccably. Of course, her pearl-colored silk suit was tailored to perfection. Her blonde hair was sculpted, and her face was a masterpiece of professional makeup, a mask of high society respectability that she wore for the world. She smelled faintly of expensive jasmine and malice. She didn't shout. Monica never shouted in public places. She leaned in close, her perfect lipstick barely an inch from my ear. Her voice a tense, venomous whisper, designed to hit maximum volume in my consciousness while remaining inaudible to any passing faculty member. "You are being utterly ungrateful, Catherine," she breathed, the jasmine scent suddenly cloying. "Selfish. Today, of all days, you choose to be difficult, refusing to sign a simple stack of papers for your family's benefit." "It's not a simple stack of papers, Monica," I replied, my voice dangerously low, mimicking her control. I looked straight ahead at the exit sign. "It's a $500,000 line of credit with me as the sole guarantor. And you know I didn't forget what those papers are about. They are designed to sink me before I even start my career." Her composure flickered. She took a quick, sharp intake of breath. "Don't be dramatic. It's bridge funding for Tyler's business. A family investment. You'll be practicing corporate law. For goodness sake, you can write this off in no time. It's the least you can do after everything your father and I have done for you." That was the classic Monica spin, turning grand theft into a virtue. I turned my head slowly, meeting her eyes. They were hard, cold, and utterly lacking in warmth. She didn't see me, the accomplished law student who was about to give the commencement address. She saw a resource, an asset to be plundered. "No," I said again, perhaps a little too firmly this time. "I told you yesterday, and I'm telling you now, I will not sign them. Not today, not ever." That was the trigger, the absolute refusal, the sudden realization that her carefully laid plan, to corner me just minutes before I walked across that stage, banking on my fear of causing a scene, was failing. Monica's face went dangerously slack. Her mask dissolved for a terrifying moment, revealing the raw, furious greed beneath. She didn't raise her voice. Instead, she used her body. With a sudden, explosive surge of strength, she shoved me hard. The movement was not a casual push. It was calculated violence. I stumbled, my back slamming against the rough concrete wall. The wind was instantly knocked out of me, and before I could recover, her perfectly manicured hand came up and struck me viciously, a bone-jarring blow directly into my side, just under my ribcage. The pain was a white-hot spear of agony, piercing through the thick fabric of the gown and the silk of my dress underneath. It was not a slap, but a punch aimed at damage. I gasped, a small, choked sound that thankfully nobody heard above the muffled sounds of the marching band practicing inside the auditorium. I clenched my jaw, fighting the instinctive urge to buckle over. This wasn't the petty abuse you hear about. This was brawny, adult-to-adult violence, aimed to injure and control a grown woman who was daring to stand up for herself. It wasn't the first time, just the most public, most blatant. I forced myself to inhale, slowly, deeply, the air burning in my lungs where the strike had landed. Every ounce of my discipline was focused on standing completely straight. My eyes watered not from the impact, but from the searing humiliation and rage. I carefully adjusted my gown, pulling the fabric down, concealing the rapidly forming bruise beneath. I brought my hand up to my mouth, not to shield myself, but to pull the corner of my lips into a semblance of a smile, a practiced, icy smooth, fake smile. The kind of smile that said, "I am fine, nothing is wrong, everything is perfect." I had learned long ago that the best defense was to appear utterly impervious and utterly perfect. Then the cavalry arrived. My father, Greg Pierce. He strode into the hallway, his face a picture of forced bonhomie, smoothing his tie. He was the picture of the respected Charlotte dentist, the upstanding church elder, the devoted husband, but my gaze fixed on his eyes. They darted from Monica's flushed cheeks to my stiff posture, lingering for less than a second on the exact area where Monica had hit me. He saw it. He always saw it, or at least the aftermath, and he always chose the same path: avoidance, denial. "Monica, Katie, what's going on back here? We need to get out front. The processional is starting in 5 minutes," he said, his voice rushed and falsely cheerful. He didn't ask what had happened. He immediately put the blame on the atmosphere. He didn't wait for Monica to answer. He turned to me, his tone dropping into a strained plea. "Catherine, honey, please, don't provoke Monica. You know she's under a lot of stress. Today is a huge day for the family. Don't ruin this. Just sign whatever it is when we get settled. Please, let's just make it easy." Don't ruin this. His entire life philosophy distilled into 3 words. Don't disrupt the carefully curated image of the perfect Southern family. Don't make him uncomfortable. I studied Greg. To the outside world, he was the picture of a good man. But in my eyes, he was the man who had traded his daughter's financial safety and emotional well-being for peace in his own house. He was the man who chose silence and complicity every single time Monica pushed the boundaries, every time she went beyond mere emotional manipulation to actual theft or violence. He was weak, not evil, which somehow made it worse. My internal timeline was ticking down. I needed to move. I glanced past them toward the window overlooking the landscaped grounds. In the side yard, a lavish graduation celebration area was already set up. White linen-covered tables, an elegant floral arch, and a small jazz trio setting up instruments. It was beautiful, opulent, and every single cent of it had been fronted by money I had transferred from my recent bonus, under Monica's firm promise that it would be fully reimbursed once the refinancing went through. The whole setup was a grotesque shrine to their parasitism. My hand dropped from my hip to my side, lightly grazing the hidden corner of my mortarboard's hood. Tucked meticulously inside the folds of the gown, just above my hip pocket, was a minuscule voice recorder, a model used by financial investigators at my part-time job. I'd checked it twice this morning. Battery full. Recording crystal clear. It had been recording since the moment Monica cornered me. Ungrateful, selfish, bridge funding, and most crucially, the shove, the strike. I subtly adjusted the microphone placement with a fractional movement. The recording was the keystone of the plan. The 18 months of cold, calculating legal preparation condensed into a few incriminating seconds of audio. Today was not about getting my degree. It was about getting my life back. I gave them a final, detached nod. "Fine, Dad," I murmured, a non-committal response that he chose to interpret as surrender. Good girl," Greg said, visibly relaxing. Already turning toward the double doors leading to the commencement hall, Monica shot me a smug, triumphant smirk, as if to say, "See, you always fold." I took one last, steadying breath, the sharp ache in my side a painful reminder of the stakes. I followed them out of the dim, dusty corridor and onto the main floor of the arena, where the air was thick with cheering, the rustle of 2,000 gowns, and the promise of a future I was fighting tooth and nail to claim for myself. As I walked, my hand still lightly shielding the tender spot on my ribcage, one thought dominated everything. Today is the last day they will ever touch my money, or lay a hand on me, without paying a price determined by law. The sharply specific ache in my side, a gift from Monica mere minutes ago, was a dull drumbeat beneath the fanfare of the processional music. As I took my assigned seat, surrounded by the nervous energy and whispered excitement of my peers, the present faded, replaced by the ghost of the past, a series of small, accumulating wounds that had led to the violent culmination in the hallway. It started subtly. When I was 16, a couple of years after Monica had married Dad. There was no physical abuse yet, nothing a child protective service would flag. Her cruelty was purely administrative and psychological. She had perfected the art of the domestic Cold War. Tyler, her biological son, was treated like a fragile prince. He was tall, charming in a shallow way, and utterly directionless. Yet Monica treated his smallest whims as urgent priorities. I, on the other hand, became the free help. "Oh, Catherine, the dishes won't magically wash themselves, dear," she'd say, gesturing with a delicate hand while she read a magazine on the patio. "Your father works so hard, and Tyler needs to focus on his, development. You're so responsible. You understand, don't you?" I understood that I was responsible for everything she didn't want to touch: the cleaning, the errands, the grocery lists, the yard work. It all migrated to my after-school hours. My room was the only clean space in the house because I was too exhausted to mess it up. Monica called it teaching me discipline. I called it a full-time job without pay. Her generosity was a weapon she wielded with surgical precision. When I got my first job at the local Kroger, working the late-shift stocking shelves, I was proud. I was earning money, and more importantly, earning independence. But Monica immediately turned it around. She wouldn't praise my ambition. She'd praise my utility. "That's so wonderful, Catherine. Think of the money we'll save on the electric bill now that you're contributing to the household budget," she'd announce at dinner, shining a spotlight on my supposed sacrifice. Yet, that same month, she bought Tyler a used $2,000 Honda Civic. She declared it an investment in his confidence and mobility. My hard-earned minimum wage went into the joint account, a silent, mandatory tithe. Dad, Greg, was the anchor to my suffering. He was still reeling. A decade later, from the death of my mother from cancer, that loss had left him emotionally gutted and financially terrified. He was a good dentist, but a terrible businessman. He found refuge in Monica's organizational skills, handing over complete control of the family finances. He signed everything she put in front of him without reading. A blind trust rooted in exhaustion and grief. "Just don't cause trouble. Katie," he would plead with me whenever I tried to mention something Monica had done. "Monica is under a lot of pressure right now. We need stability." His silence was his armor, protecting him from having to confront the truth, that the stability was purchased at my expense. The first major financial alarm went off when I was 18. Heading into college, I had worked tirelessly for a prestigious merit scholarship, and the official notification came addressed to me. When I opened it, the check stub indicated the money had been directly deposited, but when I checked my personal account, only a small fraction, enough for books and the cheapest meal plan, was there. I confronted Monica, clutching the paperwork. She didn't bat an eye. "Oh, that," she said dismissively, rearranging flowers in a vase. "Yes, I redirected the bulk of it to the household account. It's helping cover your general upkeep. Darling, food, utilities, your share of the mortgage. It's for the whole family. Catherine, we all invested in your success." It was pure, unadulterated embezzlement, packaged as communal responsibility. The choice was clear: scream, expose the financial theft, and become the ungrateful, demanding child who broke her father's fragile new peace, or swallow it, work harder, and escape faster. I chose the latter. I told myself that the goal was the same: get into a great law school, and then everything would be different. I doubled down on working and studying. I held down 2, sometimes 3, part-time jobs through my undergraduate years. While my peers were building networks, I was cleaning offices or tutoring late at night. Every extra hour meant one fewer dollar Monica could claim was hers to manage. Meanwhile, Tyler's life was an endless, expensive loop of failure. He dropped out of the community college after switching majors 4 times. Then came the series of failed startup ventures: a customized dog treat delivery service, a cryptocurrency mining operation that blew a fuse in the garage, and a disastrous mobile car wash that ended with a lawsuit. Monica just laughed it off, especially to her friends. "Oh, Tyler is such a visionary. He needs a real foundation," she'd say. Then, inevitably, she'd turn to me with a proprietary glance. "But it's fine. Catherine is going to be a lawyer soon. She'll be able to properly bankroll her brother. She'll guide his capital investment." The assumption was terrifying. My future success was already monetized and assigned to Tyler's endless deficits. The emergency calls from home started increasing in frequency and severity. It was never minor. It was a sudden, $20,000 repair for a leaky roof that threatened the entire house's structure. It was the crucial $5,000 piece of equipment for Dad's dental practice that mysteriously broke. It was Tyler's sudden, unexpected illness that required a quick $10,000 wire transfer for specialist care. Each time, I sent the money, depleting my small savings. Each time, Monica promised repayment, using phrases like temporary liquidity issue and fully repayable upon refinancing. And each time, I internally rationalized it as a temporary measure. It's family. I'm helping Dad. It's just until I graduate. The concept of family debt became Monica's mantra. Every single thing I had received growing up, the roof over my head, the food on the table, the gas money for the car I had bought myself, was systematically tallied and presented as a debt I was morally obligated to repay with interest now that I was succeeding. "You have to remember where you came from, Catherine," she'd tell me with saccharine sincerity. "We sacrificed so much for you to be here. A law degree is a privilege, and privileges come with responsibility to those who provided the foundation." It culminated in the scene that still burned in my memory as I sat in the graduation hall. I was 22, finally signing the documents for the massive student loans required for Crescent Ridge Law, loans that would bury me for decades, but were the only way out. Monica was there, beaming, holding a pen out. I remember her hand resting heavily on my shoulder, not a comforting touch, but a possessive one. "There you go, sweetheart," she chirped, watching me sign away my future. "Think of this as the family's investment in your future." At the time, the phrase sounded supportive, a rare moment of maternal validation. Now, years later, sitting in my cap and gown, that memory was acid. It wasn't an investment in me. It was an investment to be extracted from me. That single, simple statement, the family's investment, was the true beginning of the financial nightmare I was now determined to end. The physical pain in my side was fading, replaced by the white-hot clarity of my 18-month-long resolve. There would be no more payments, no more family debt, and no more investments in Tyler's doomed projects. The processional music swelled, and I forced my attention back to the present, the very near past, to be precise, the compressed weeks leading up to this pressure cooker of a day. The memory of the loan papers I signed years ago was the seed, but the current reality was the suffocating jungle. I was in my final year at Crescent Ridge, having successfully navigated the gauntlet of moot court, law review applications, and the sheer volume of reading required to survive. My lifeline, both intellectual and financial, was my part-time position at Sentinel Ridge Analytics, a niche legal tech firm in downtown Charlotte specializing in forensic accounting, cybercrime, and complex financial fraud, ironically, the exact kind of fraud I was living through. By this stage, the illusion of my father being the breadwinner had completely dissolved. My income, even as a part-time student, had become the primary liquidity source for the Pierce household. It was a bizarre inversion of roles. The student was underwriting the family. I paid a substantial portion of the mortgage on Greg and Monica's second, less profitable investment property. I funneled money for Tyler's endless gas and miscellaneous expenses, which usually meant new video games or bar tabs. Every payment was accompanied by Monica's soothing, promissory voice. "It's temporary, darling. We'll pay you back next month when the refi closes." The refi was always next month, and the repayment never came. The total accumulated debt they owed me personally was easily in the tens of thousands of dollars, far exceeding what I made in a year. The emotional drainage was constant, at every church social, every neighborhood gathering. Monica played her role to perfection. She was the martyr, the long-suffering wife. "I have sacrificed everything for my late husband's daughter." She'd sigh dramatically to the church committee. "You know how hard it is to raise a child that isn't your own, especially with Greg's sensitive nature. But Catherine is so lucky, truly, to have a family that supports her so fully. We're pushing her to succeed. She is our little star." The narrative was meticulously crafted. I was not successful despite them. I was successful because of their extraordinary sacrifice. My accomplishments, my academic awards, my part-time salary increase at Sentinel Ridge were merely the family's dividend on their investment. The moment any good financial news came my way, Monica knew about it instantly. A $5,000 bonus for assisting on a complex case? A $7,000 scholarship for the final semester? Within hours. Monica would call, not to congratulate me, but to tell me she had already factored that exact, precise amount into her budget for a sudden, new crisis, a faulty furnace, a mandatory church donation, a surprise tax assessment. She always knew the number, down to the last dollar. I never sent the bank statements to their house, yet she possessed a terrifying level of specific detail. Slowly, I began to see why. All the mail, the sensitive mail, was diverted. Letters regarding my private student loan interest rates, alerts about credit card offers, suggestions for mortgage refinancing, even certain tax documents that needed my signature. They rarely, if ever, made it to my small rented apartment mail slot. "Oh, darling, it's much safer to have everything sent here," Monica had explained casually a year ago. "With all the identity theft nowadays, it's better for one person to control it, and I'm always here to sign for things. I can just forward the important bits." What she was forwarding were the pieces that made her look good. What she was hoarding were the documents that detailed the accumulating financial wreckage she was creating in my name. The chilling realization of how deeply they viewed me as a communal asset hit me one late evening. I was visiting the house to pick up a stack of old textbooks. I was just outside the kitchen, rounding the corner, when I heard Monica on the phone. Her voice was low, conspiratorial, and fiercely possessive. "Yes, the bar exam is only a few months away," she said into the receiver. "Don't worry about the capital right now. Just be patient. Once the girl passes, we will have our own in-house counsel, free legal work, plus access to the serious money. It's perfect. We get the prestige, and we get the cash flow." The girl, our own in-house counsel, access to the serious money. My blood turned to ice. My law degree wasn't an achievement to them. It was a glorified business license they were expecting to co-opt. It was a tool to legitimize their parasitic existence. The pressure reached its breaking point during a strained family dinner the week before graduation. Tyler, who was now 25 and still unemployed, was at his most buoyant. He had a new vision, real estate flipping. "It's the market, you guys," he chirped, spreading cheap blueprints across the kitchen island. "Total goldmine. I found this old warehouse downtown, perfect for conversion into boutique apartments, but I need the initial capital, a bridge loan, maybe $200,000, and an established, trustworthy name on the paperwork to get the bank to move fast." He looked directly at me, his eyes wide and eager, the epitome of the entitled younger brother. "It has to be yours. Catherine, your new lawyer status, your pristine credit score. It's money the bank is just giving away, and a huge chunk of your upcoming bonus from Sentinel Ridge would cover the initial fees. He needed my signature as the guarantor, exposing my future assets, and he needed hundreds of thousands in bridge capital from my future earnings. It was a transparent attempt to handcuff me to his inevitable failure. I kept my voice calm, almost clinical. That sounds like a significant financial commitment. Tyler, I need time to review the prospectus and assess the legal liabilities. A small, polite refusal, but in the language of the Pierce family, it was a declaration of war. Greg immediately sided with the parasite. He put his arm around Tyler, his expression shifting from detached to accusatory. Catherine, for God's sake, stop being so difficult. You always do this. It's family. Don't be selfish. Tyler needs this leg up. What's the point of all that money if you don't use it to help the people who love you? He leaned forward, dropping his voice as he delivered the ultimate emotional threat. Without family, money is meaningless. The sheer audacity of them, sitting there demanding that I sacrifice my financial future to preserve their dysfunctional comfort, was stunning. They weren't asking. They were demanding the key to my life savings. I finished my dinner, excused myself early, and drove back to my small apartment feeling utterly alone and cold. That night, I didn't sleep. I logged into my personal finance dashboard, checking the accounts I kept separate, the ones Monica didn't know about. They were secure. But then, out of habit, I pulled my full credit report from the 3 major bureaus. It was a routine check that every law student is advised to do before graduation. I scrolled down, past my student loans, past the 2 credit cards I used responsibly. Then I stopped. My breath hitched. Beneath the legitimate entries, a new line stood out, glaring and wrong. A recently opened $5,000 personal loan from a regional bank I had never done business with. It was dated 8 weeks ago, my name, my social security number, but I had no recollection of signing anything. A knot of profound dread tightened in my stomach. The family trap wasn't just emotional and subtle anymore. It was forged in steel and backed by banking law. They had crossed the line. The cold realization was absolute. They weren't just planning to steal my future. They had already started stealing my present. The $5,000 personal loan was just the appetizer, shaking, fueled by cold dread and the sterile glare of my laptop screen. I ran a full, comprehensive report through the centralized credit reporting system. The results came back immediately, hitting me with the force of an avalanche. The total was staggering, over $180,000 in unauthorized debt, all bearing my name. The initial personal loan was the least of it. There were 2 other substantial individual loans, one for $40,000 and one for nearly $60,000. There was a high-limit store credit card from a national chain I never used, maxed out. And the truly insidious one, a large credit consolidation line, almost $70,000, opened just 6 months ago, all of it. Every single cent of the $180,000 was tied directly to my social security number, my name, and my credit score, which had plummeted from the high 700s to the low 6s in less than 2 years. I stared at the screen, a cold sweat breaking out on my neck. My first, desperate reaction was self-doubt, the insidious voice of gaslighting perfected by Monica over years. Did I forget? Was I so busy studying I signed something in a haze? Did Dad ask me to co-sign that one time for the practice and I just blanked? But the dates were too precise, too chillingly aligned with the family's manufactured financial crises. The $40,000 loan was opened the week Dad's dental chair equipment mysteriously failed. The consolidation loan coincided exactly with the time the family was scrambling for a down payment on Greg's second, ill-fated investment property. Every instance of their proclaimed misfortune was immediately followed by a new, massive financial obligation in my name. The pattern was intentional. It was not error, it was execution. I drove straight to the house, the physical pain in my side from the morning's blow momentarily forgotten beneath the acid surge of betrayal. I didn't announce myself. I walked into the kitchen where Monica was serenely clipping coupons and threw the thick stack of credit reports onto the granite countertop. Explain this, I commanded, my voice flat and devoid of emotion, the tone of a litigator, not a daughter. Monica glanced down at the documents, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows barely twitching. She laughed a tight, brittle sound. Oh, Catherine, don't be so dramatic. Just a few bookkeeping errors. I told you, keeping track of 3 people's finances is a nightmare. I'll sort it out. Just an issue with the paperwork, I'm sure. She tried to dismiss $180,000 as paperwork. Greg walked in, drawn by the unusual sound of my controlled anger. He scanned the reports, his face going pale beneath his professional tan. Greg, I pressed, looking only at him. Did you know about this? Did you authorize using my information for these loans? He wrung his hands, avoiding my eyes. I don't know. Katie, I trust Monica to handle everything. I sign what she tells me to sign. She said she was dealing with the practice's temporary cash flow problem, and I trusted her to take care of it for the family. I trusted her to take care of it, the familiar refrain of his perpetual abdication. When I demanded specific answers, which bank, which date, which signature, Monica dropped the mask of easy dismissal. Her posture stiffened, and her voice hardened, switching instantly to her patented righteous indignation. Oh, now you're using your fancy law talk on us, Catherine. Your father signed some things with your verbal agreement to help out, and I handled the details, she hissed. In this family, we don't keep ledgers like lawyers. We trust each other. You think you're so superior because you went to law school? You're making a moral issue out of helping your struggling family. She expertly attempted the final reversal, transforming my legitimate legal query into a moral failing, the crime of being ungrateful and untrusting. I knew, definitively, there would be no confession, no explanation, and certainly no apology. The in-house interrogation was over. I collected the reports and left the house, the stench of their lies clinging to me. The next morning, I was sitting in the sterile, windowless office of Amara Jensen, a senior partner at Sentinel Ridge Analytics who had reluctantly become my mentor. I presented the reports not as my personal tragedy, but as a hypothetical case study involving complex familial identity theft and financial abuse. Amara, a formidable black woman with the weary eyes of someone who had seen every form of corporate and domestic corruption, leaned back, reading the reports with icy calm. It's not hypothetical, Catherine, she stated simply, placing the reports down. This is a textbook case of familial identity theft, specifically targeting the high credit score and future earning capacity of an aspiring professional. They saw your degree as an untapped reserve. We began the forensic autopsy. Amara's team helped me pull the actual loan documents from the banks. The pieces clicked into a chilling mosaic of calculated criminal behavior. One loan application used an obviously forged digital signature, a clumsy copy of an old-school permission slip signature. The email confirmations were all routed through a generic Gmail account that shared an IP address with the Pierce family home computer. Crucially, the bank statements for all these accounts were sent to a P.O. box Monica maintained exclusively for her personal shopping and mail order business. We compared a legitimate digital signature of mine from an employment contract with the signatures on the loan agreements. The handwriting was distinctly different, the strokes hesitant. Then came the damning evidence, the timestamps on the electronic signatures. On the day the largest consolidation loan was finalized, my phone's GPS data, which I had running for mileage logs for work, placed me 300 miles away in Asheville for a student conference. But the real gut punch came from the IP address logs. Amara's team, with the cooperation of one of the smaller bank's technical departments, traced the original application submission for the $40,000 loan. Look here, Catherine, Amara said, pointing to the log. The application was submitted at 7:45 p.m. on a Tuesday, and the connection point is listed as an unsecured subnet linked to a commercial building in South Charlotte. I squinted at the address. That's it. That's my father's dental practice. The unsecured Wi-Fi for the waiting room. It was the perfect shield. A commercial IP address that belonged to Greg's business. making it seem less like a home-based fraud, but executed by Monica, who had unfettered access to the office after hours. Amara looked at me, her face grave. They are not slowing down. Your clean credit and your impending status as an attorney are too lucrative. If you don't act now, they will leverage your full $500,000 line of credit they asked you to co-sign today, and possibly more. They are going to leverage your future income until you are so underwater, you'll have to work for them just to make the minimum payments on their debts. But the investigation wasn't over. As Amara's analysts dug deeper into the banking logs associated with the compromised PIO box, they found a startling, final piece of evidence. "This just came in," Amara said, handing me a printout of an internal bank memo. "Monica contacted the bank 3 days ago. She was asking for the procedure and paperwork for a full power of attorney, naming herself as your financial proxy, and check the second page." The second page was a pre-qualification loan application for the purchase of an old warehouse in central Charlotte, the exact industrial building Tyler had bragged about flipping at dinner. The loan was massive, close to $800,000, and the application was drafted to be placed solely in my name as the purchasing principal. The date for the expected closing signature? I read the memo, my breath hitching, the words swimming before my eyes. Anticipated closing date, May 22nd. Today, graduation day. The realization was a hammer blow. The paperwork Monica had tried to force me to sign in the hallway wasn't just a line of credit or a simple contract. It was the power of attorney and the final purchase agreement, designed to be signed under pressure and public scrutiny. The graduation ceremony was the perfect cover, the ultimate legal trap, intended to lock me into a mountain of debt before I had even tossed my cap. The discovery that the final, most devastating set of papers was timed for my graduation day, a power of attorney, and a nearly $1 million real estate debt, erased any lingering ambiguity. This wasn't an attempt to borrow from me, it was an attempt to own me, legally and perpetually. The internal conflict that followed was the most agonizing battle of my life, a cold war between the daughter I used to be and the lawyer I was about to become. If I moved forward with the evidence I possessed, Monica and Tyler would face criminal charges, identity theft, bank fraud, and potentially even elder financial abuse against my father. Given his complicity and lack of knowledge, if I stayed silent, the debt would swallow my career, and the financial bleeding would never stop. I was paralyzed by the concept of family reputation. Amara, ever the pragmatic legal veteran, laid out the 2 stark paths. Option 1. You treat this as a civil matter. You pay off the $180,000 with a high-interest loan, cut all contact, and rebuild your credit over the next 5 to 10 years. You protect your father's name, and you preserve the illusion of peace. She paused, letting the bitter reality of that option sink in. Or option 2. You treat this like the crime it is. You cooperate with law enforcement. You become the witness for the prosecution, and you face them in court. It will be public. It will be messy, and you will burn every single bridge you have left in that household. My mind instantly flashed to a quiet moment years ago, standing next to my real mother's hospital bed. She was frail, but her voice was strong. "Promise me you'll look out for your father. Katie, he's brilliant with people, but he's never been good with money. He relies on others to keep things straight." That promise, to protect my vulnerable father, was the core of my hesitation. I could endure Monica's abuse, but I couldn't stand to be the one who caused Greg's professional reputation to crumble. Then, Amara pushed across the latest printout from her team. It was the preliminary application for the massive $500,000 expansion capital line that Tyler needed, with my signature clumsily forged as the primary co-signer. "This is what you have to understand." "Catherine," Amara said, her voice firm. "This document was prepared after you expressed hesitation about the project. They know you're wavering, and they're moving ahead anyway. They don't see you as a person. They see you as a renewable resource. They will not stop. They are legally committing you to bankruptcy while you are sitting in a lecture hall. The graduation ceremony isn't just a signing day. It's the perfect ambush, guaranteeing you won't refuse in front of 100 relatives and faculty members. It was the final, inescapable truth. They weren't redeemable. They weren't simply misguided. They were criminals who were escalating their fraud, using the concept of family as both their cover and their weapon. My safety, both emotional and financial, was legally incompatible with their freedom. The decision was cold, logical, and inevitable. I had to choose myself. With Amara's full legal guidance, I made the call that night. I contacted a special investigator assigned to the Mecklenburg County District Attorney's Office, a man who specialized in white-collar and domestic fraud. I presented him with the full package: the credit reports, the IP traces, the forged signatures, the P.O. box evidence, and the most recent chilling memo regarding the power of attorney scheduled for my graduation day. I officially transitioned from being a law student with a problem to being the protected victim and primary witness in a criminal case against my own family. The investigator, understanding the unique context of the graduation ceremony, worked with Amara and me to devise what Amara grimly called a legal sting operation. The goal wasn't just to arrest them, it was to solidify the criminal evidence in the moment. We needed to capture them attempting to use the fraudulent documents and, ideally, secure a few more incriminating statements, like the one Monica had already delivered in the hallway this morning. The plan was audacious. I was to act normally, delay signing the documents, and allow Monica and Tyler to pressure me publicly or semi-privately at the event. The small voice recorder in my academic gown was central. If Monica or Tyler overtly threatened me, admitted the forgery, or attempted to force the signing, it would provide the final, necessary piece of evidence for the immediate, on-site execution of the arrest warrants. I then had the difficult task of briefing the school administration. I requested a private meeting with the dean, explaining only that I had a serious personal safety and legal concern that involved 2 non-students attending the ceremony, and that, due to the sensitive nature of the case, I needed to preemptively increase camera surveillance and security presence around the VIP family seating area. I was careful not to reveal the full scope of the identity theft, merely alluding to a volatile financial situation. The dean, shocked but sympathetic to the emotional distress of a star graduate, quickly agreed to discreetly comply. The final action that solidified my commitment happened late the night before graduation. I sat across the table from Amara, not as her student, but as her client. "I need you to represent me, Amara," I said, sliding a contract across the desk. "As my private counsel, not just Sentinel Ridge's senior partner, I need you to be there in the hall, ready to act." Amara picked up the pen and signed her name, then looked up at me with profound respect. "You're not doing this for revenge, Catherine. You're doing this for survival, and you're doing it the right way." I took the pen from her and signed the agreement. It wasn't the $500,000 line of credit Monica wanted me to sign. It was the contract retaining the toughest legal mind in Charlotte to defend my future. The difference was everything. I wasn't the vulnerable girl begging for protection. I was a lawyer in waiting, choosing the weapon and the warrior to fight my war. The fee was substantial, but compared to the $180,000 they had already stolen and the $1 million they were about to, it was the best investment I had ever made. The morning of graduation felt less like a celebration and more like the final, agonizing countdown of a pressure cooker. I moved with deliberate slowness, a strange, terrifying calm settling over me. Every action was calculated, every movement serving 2 masters: the public facade of the proud graduate and the secret agent gathering the final evidence for her freedom. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, applying makeup with the meticulous care of a theater artist. The soft beige foundation and professional concealer were necessary not to enhance my features, but to hide the constellation of bruises and shadows that had become a permanent part of my life, the historical record of Monica's casual cruelty. Today's fresh, sharp ache from her early morning strike was hidden beneath the heavy academic gown, but the older, yellowing marks from previous disagreements required professional camouflage. When the gown was on, Heavy and black, it felt less like a garment of achievement and more like armor. My fingers, steady and precise, went straight to the tiny electronic device secured inside the inner lining. I checked the battery level again, full power, capable of recording 8 hours of high-quality audio. I confirmed the placement of the miniature microphone, perfectly positioned to capture the sharpest whispers, battery full, audio clear. This little machine was the truth teller, my immovable witness. Downstairs, the atmosphere in the Pierce house was nauseatingly cheerful. Monica, looking immaculate and predatory in her pearl suit, was running the morning like a stage manager. "Greg, honey, your tie is slightly crooked. Today is about projecting success," she chirped, straightening his silk necktie with fastidious care. She moved on to Tyler, who was struggling with a pair of cufflinks. "Tyler, sweetheart, remember how much this means to the family's profile. You must look the part of the ambitious young entrepreneur." She fussed over them, her husband and her son, treating them like two valuable props in her carefully constructed image. Her constant stream of chatter was all about the family's big day, our investment finally paying off, and the connections we'll make. She spoke endlessly about me, but she never once made eye contact with me, treating me as an object, a trophy to be displayed, rather than an independent person embarking on her life. "Catherine, are you ready?" she asked, finally glancing my way, not at my face, but at the gown. "Let's go. We don't want to be late for our big moment." The drive to Crescent Ridge Law School was tense and silent, save for Monica's low-volume classical music. As we pulled out of the driveway, she reached into her large designer handbag and pulled out a high-end leather briefcase, one of those slick executive models. "Here, darling," she said, placing the cool, heavy leather case directly onto my lap. "These are the final papers. Just a few formalities we need to clear up before everything goes big league. Think of them as documents that protect the family. You need to sign them so we can all move forward into this new phase." Her tone was light, almost dismissive, implying that what lay inside was the equivalent of signing a holiday card, a few harmless procedures before the real celebration. But I knew the truth, and the weight of the briefcase felt like a boulder. I unclasped the twin gold locks. Inside, stacked neatly, were the documents that represented the total obliteration of my financial life, the power of attorney, granting Monica full financial control over me, the full recourse guarantee agreements for Tyler's initial $500,000 expansion capital line, and the entire closing file for the $800,000 purchase of the warehouse, which would become the debt I owed to the bank. If Tyler's real estate flip failed, and based on his track record, it would, the entire debt would fall squarely on my shoulders. I feigned a casual examination, flipping through the pages just enough to let the camera inside my mind record the titles. "The warehouse plans look interesting, Tyler," I remarked, forcing a polite, professional tone. "A bold vision." "It's huge, Kay," Tyler enthused from the back seat, clearly thinking he was already halfway to millionaire status. I closed the briefcase, placing it back on my lap. "Wonderful. But signing these kinds of massive liability documents feels appropriate only after the ceremony. It would be a much more meaningful moment to sign them as part of the official celebration. Let's do it right after I get my diploma, at the reception, in front of everyone." The delay was intentional. I needed more evidence. I needed her to panic. Monica's smile froze. Her eyes narrowed. "Catherine, don't be ridiculous. This is standard bank procedure. We need this filed this morning. The bank is waiting." "It can wait an hour," I said firmly. "I'm about to give the commencement speech. Monica, my focus needs to be on justice and law, not signing away the next 10 years of my life in a car park." We reached the school and the pressure increased exponentially. After escaping the chaos of the main entrance, we found ourselves again in the cramped concrete hallway behind the stage, the same place where the first blow was struck earlier that morning. The processional was about to start. The low hum of the massive crowd was building through the double doors. Monica was frantic. My refusal to sign publicly at the reception meant she couldn't use the facade of family unity to pressure me. She needed the signatures now. "Listen to me, you spoiled little brat," she snarled. Dropping the pretense of the devoted stepmother, she grabbed the leather briefcase and thrust it into my stomach. "You will sign these papers right now. My lawyer is waiting for the email confirmation. You are not going to ruin everything we have worked for." "I am not signing unauthorized debt," I stated, my voice calm, but raised slightly. My mission was to bait her, to force her to confess to the core crime for the recorder. In a terrifying flash, she completely lost control. Her perfect composure snapped like dry kindling. She slammed the briefcase down, grabbed my shoulder, and shoved me hard against the wall. A replay of the earlier violence, but with more fury. Her hand came up and struck the exact same spot on my ribs, this time harder, with a twist of malicious intent. I gasped, the pain momentarily stealing my ability to think. A sharp, debilitating jolt. She did it again. I did not fight back physically. Instead, I forced the air back into my lungs, straightened my back, and spoke clearly and slowly, aiming my words directly at the hidden microphone inside my gown. "You have already forged my signature on over $180,000 in loans," I said, my voice steady, professional. "Do you truly think no one would notice you stole my identity? Did you think I wouldn't find out?" The strategy worked. The deliberate, shocking confrontation of the truth forced her to react defensively, pulling out the years of manipulative rhetoric that she believed justified her actions. Monica was breathing heavily, her mascara starting to run slightly. She pointed an accusatory finger at my chest. "I did what was necessary for this family. All those loans, the money for the house, for Tyler's needs. It was all for us. We deserve this. You owe us." I did what was necessary for this family, in a court of law, under the charges of identity theft and bank fraud. That phrase was a damning, unsolicited admission of guilt and intent. It confirmed my role as the victim whose assets were seen as communal property. Just then, Greg arrived, bursting into the hallway. It was clear from his panicked expression that he had overheard the final, loud exchange. He looked from my stiff, pale face to Monica's fury, seeing the unmistakable signs of a physical confrontation. But he still chose his side. He rushed to Monica, gently rubbing her back, and then turned to me, his voice a frantic plea. "Katie, please, don't make things difficult. Monica is right. This is for us. Just sign it and we can discuss it later. Please, honey, don't make a scene. Don't make a scene." His fear of social awkwardness was stronger than his desire to protect his own daughter from injury and financial ruin. I looked at the two of them, the furious thief and the weak enabler, standing shoulder to shoulder against me. I nodded once, a sharp, decisive movement, and then, without another word, I adjusted my gown one last time, turned, and walked toward the stage doors. The performance was about to begin, and the most crucial evidence was safely recorded. The graduation ceremony was a spectacle of academic triumph. It took place in the university's massive indoor arena, a cavernous space usually reserved for basketball games. The energy was electric, vibrating with the collective pride of thousands of attendees. Long rows of graduates in their black gowns filled the floor, while the stands above were packed with families, a sea of color, noise, and well-wishes. Faculty members, resplendent in their doctoral robes and velvet hoods, sat like royalty on the stage, beneath fluttering banners bearing the school crest and motto. From a distance, looking out at the scene, it was the picture of a perfect American milestone. I sat in my designated seat, surrounded by my cohort. Everyone was buzzing, whispering excitedly about their jobs, their summer bar prep schedules, and the sheer relief of being done. They laughed about their professors, shared final notes on exams, and spoke with such genuine pride about the families who had come to celebrate their hard-won success. For them, this was the culmination of dreams. For me, the atmosphere was a bizarre, suffocating juxtaposition. My family was there, too, but they had not come to celebrate my future. They had come to claim it as their own asset. They were seated in the VIP section, center row, Monica looking perfectly composed, Greg attempting a cheerful demeanor, and Tyler wearing a suit that was clearly too expensive for his current entrepreneurial status. They were not my supportive unit. They were the executioner and the willing accomplices, waiting for the moment they could force me to sign the deed to my own bondage. The small recorder in my gown felt like a beating heart against my ribs. The ceremony moved swiftly through the administrative speeches, the dean's address, and the presentation of various honors. Then came the moment I had been simultaneously dreading and planning for. The university president, a dignified woman with a warm, booming voice, approached the podium. And now, it is my distinct honor to introduce this year's top student, the recipient of the Thurgood Marshall Advocacy Award, who will deliver the commencement address. Please welcome Catherine Wade. A huge wave of applause washed over the arena. I stood up, adjusting the weight of the gown and the small device hidden beneath. I walked onto the stage, the lights blinding, the roar of the crowd momentarily overwhelming. Monica was already on her feet in the front row, a triumphant, proprietary smile plastered on her face. Her phone was out, camera recording, ready to capture the moment her daughter, her investment, stood before the world, implicitly validating Monica's sacrifice. I walked to the microphone, took a deep breath, and let the white-hot clarity of my purpose stabilize me. I spoke not as a law graduate, but as a newly minted lawyer of justice. My address started conventionally, talking about the honor of the profession, the struggle, and the future. But then, I began to weave in the theme that felt most urgent, the need for ethical rigor and the protection of the vulnerable. We, as future officers of the court, I projected clearly, my voice resonating through the powerful speakers, have an extraordinary responsibility. We are here not just to memorize statutes, but to uphold a moral code. Justice is not always found in the public square, against a clearly defined opponent. I looked out at the vast sea of faces, then, pointedly, just past them to the faculty. Sometimes, the greatest fraud, the most profound injustice, and the most dangerous theft happens quietly, in the places where we are supposed to be safest. It happens in the shadows of the home, against those who are too afraid, too young, or too dependent to fight back. I delivered the line I had rehearsed in my head 1,000 times, letting the full weight of my personal experience infuse the words. We must remember that sometimes, the most dangerous thief is the one who shares your last name. The words hung in the air, a sudden, heavy shift in the celebratory mood. A few people clapped slowly, recognizing the depth of the sentiment, but the majority were confused. It was exactly at that moment, as the last syllable echoed off the arena walls, that the silent, external plan was executed. A sudden commotion erupted at the far end of the auditorium. The heavy double doors swung open, and a small, determined group entered. Leading the way were 2 uniformed Mecklenburg County Sheriff's deputies, their presence stark and unmistakable against the festive atmosphere. Behind them walked a civilian, a grim-faced court officer carrying a stack of official papers, and right beside him, impeccably dressed and radiating controlled power, was Amara Jensen, my lawyer. The crowd began to stir. Whispers spread like wildfire, drawing everyone's attention away from the stage and toward the center aisle. The president, looking utterly perplexed, stammered, "Excuse me, security, please maintain order." The deputies ignored her, marching with steady professional purpose straight down the main aisle, headed directly for the VIP section. The court officer, arriving just below the stage, raised his voice and cut through the rising clamor. "Attention, please. I apologize for the interruption. We have an urgent legal matter to address involving 2 specific individuals present at this ceremony." The microphone on the stage had been turned down, but the arena's internal public address system was still active, carrying his official, authoritative voice over the entire hall. My heart hammered. This was it. The court officer held up a document. "I need to request that the president suspend the current program for a moment of judicial notice." The president, recognizing the uniform and the gravity, reluctantly nodded to the sound technician to lower the music. A deafening silence fell over the thousands of people. All eyes were focused on the VIP section. The court officer's voice boomed across the arena. Monica Elaine Pierce and Tyler James Pierce, please rise. The effect was instantaneous and shocking. The entire audience craned their necks, the whispering escalating to a collective wave of sound. Every single person in the massive arena was looking at my family. In the front row, Monica didn't rise immediately. She stood up slowly, a look of pure, bewildered indignation twisting her features. She looked less like a proud mother and more like a queen whose crown had just been knocked off. Tyler scrambled to his feet beside her, his face a sudden, sickly white. Greg remained seated, his head bowed, instantly shrinking into himself. The two deputies and Amara were now standing directly in front of Monica and Tyler. Amara looked directly at Monica, her expression devoid of emotion. Mrs. Pierce, Mr. Pierce, you are under arrest for suspicion of multiple counts of identity theft, bank fraud, and forgery. As Amara spoke, the court officer handed a piece of paper, the formal arrest warrant, to the deputy closest to Monica. The deputy professionally unfolded the paper and held it up, displaying the bold official seal before Monica's eyes. The document listed the charges: unauthorized use of personal identifying information, multiple counts of bank fraud, forgery of instruments, conspiracy to commit financial abuse, the very crimes I had spent the last 18 months documenting and had just alluded to in my speech. Monica made a small, pathetic noise, a high-pitched sound of outrage and disbelief. She turned her head wildly, searching the crowd for help, for validation, for someone to witness this outrage. Her eyes finally locked onto mine, still standing at the podium. The realization hit her like a physical blow. I had done this. I stood tall, the weight of my academic gown suddenly feeling earned. My head held high. I did not smile. I simply nodded once, a gesture that contained all the years of pain, the stolen money, the emotional abuse, and the physical assaults. The deputy placed a hand gently, but firmly, on Monica's arm. Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent. The sound of the deputy reciting the Miranda rights over the university's public address system, intended for a commencement speech, was surreal. As the second deputy gently guided a shaking Tyler out of the row, the crowd erupted, not in applause, but in stunned, horrified gasps. I watched as the two figures who had attempted to steal my entire future were escorted out through the center aisle, their exit silent but for the soft, metallic clink of the handcuffs that sealed their fate. They were no longer the proud family. They were suspects in custody. The president rushed to the podium, utterly lost. I reached out and gently took the microphone. Dean, President, I said, my voice strong and clear, cutting through the murmurs. The program can continue. Let the commencement proceed. I stepped back, allowed the faculty to regain their composure, and returned to my seat. The atmosphere was shattered, but the silence had been broken by the truth. My father remained in his seat, his face hidden behind his hands. I looked straight ahead, focusing only on the future, knowing that the price for my freedom was finally being paid. The shock was visceral, instantly dissolving the polished solemnity of the graduation ceremony. The crowd's collective gasp was followed by a confused, rising roar. Many people initially believed this was some kind of elaborate, darkly humorous commencement skit, a bizarre legal performance staged by the law school. This delusion was swiftly shattered. The court officer, maintaining absolute procedural rigidity, raised his voice again, directing it towards the now standing figures of Monica and Tyler. He began to read the formal notice of indictment, and he didn't use euphemisms. The charges herein are filed on behalf of the state of North Carolina, pursuant to evidence provided by the victim, Catherine Wade. These include 3 counts of felony identity theft, specifically involving the unauthorized procurement of loans totaling over $180,000 from 2 regional banks and 1 credit union. The dates of these offenses directly coincide with periods of claimed financial distress in the household of Gregory Pierce. As the numbers were read, $180,000, the murmurs in the stands morphed into horrified exclamations. It was no longer a vague dispute. It was a vast amount of money. A massive crime. Then, the stage itself became the centerpiece of the prosecution. The large digital screens flanking the stage, moments ago displaying the Crescent Ridge Law School crest, suddenly switched. The projection showed a split image. On the left, enlarged to grotesque proportions, was the forged signature on the largest consolidation loan agreement, a clumsy, hesitant scrawl labeled Forged Signature, Catherine Wade. On the right, clean and fluid, was my verified digital signature from my Sentinel Ridge employment contract, labeled Verified Signature, Catherine Wade. The difference was glaring, unmistakable proof of the fraud. The court officer announced, his voice amplified by the arena speakers. These visual exhibits, along with supporting IP address logs and banking records, were provided to the Mecklenburg District Attorney's Office by Sentinel Ridge Analytics in the course of an official fraud investigation, with the full consent and cooperation of the victim, Catherine Wade. This confirmation that the graduate standing at the podium, was the person who engineered this precise public exposure, hit the arena like lightning. Monica's face was a study in furious, panicked denial. She was still fighting the deputy's hold on her arm. "This is a mistake," she shrieked, her expensive suit and perfect hair suddenly looking desperate and unhinged. She agreed. She said yes. We all agreed. This is a family matter. We are her family, and she belongs to us. Her desperate cry, that bizarre proprietary claim that I belonged to them, unintentionally confirmed the core mindset that fueled her crime. Her stepdaughter was not a person with agency, but a financial resource to be managed and controlled. Tyler, sensing the deputy tightening his grip, tried to bolt from the row. He twisted, attempting to squeeze past the deputy. The officer, a massive man, blocked his exit with a single, unmoving arm. "Mr. Pierce," the deputy stated calmly, using the microphone to project his voice, "I advise you not to resist. Furthermore, I must advise you that in addition to the current charges, you are currently in violation of your active probation terms stemming from a separate felony fraud conviction in Guilford County. Any resistance here will be treated as a violation." The mention of felony fraud conviction and probation terms was a sudden, seismic shock to the audience, and to me. I had only recently discovered the existence of Tyler's prior conviction during the investigation with Amara, but the public revelation was strategically timed. It instantly demolished any pretense that Tyler was merely a misguided entrepreneur. He was a repeat criminal offender. The commotion brought Amara Jensen forward, with the dean's shell-shocked permission. Amara approached the podium and spoke into the microphone I had just used, adopting the calm, measured tone of an experienced legal counsel. "As the legal representative for Ms. Catherine Wade, let me briefly explain the nature of this crime," Amara announced, effectively giving a real-time lecture on familial financial abuse. "This pattern involves opening lines of credit, taking out loans in the victim's name, confiscating scholarship funds, and then using the emotional leverage of family obligation to gaslight the victim into complicity. It is not an error. It is a calculated scheme of theft and forgery, perpetrated against an individual who was in a position of trust and dependence." I stood there, feeling strangely detached, watching the years of subtle, agonizing emotional manipulation finally be given its proper clinical name. Theft, forgery, financial abuse. Hundreds of witnesses were seeing my truth. Not as a narrative of a difficult childhood, but as a criminal case study. Then, the focus shifted to the silent, shrinking figure in the row. "Mr. Gregory Pierce," the court officer called out, forcing Greg to stand up. "Are you aware of the details of these loans secured in your daughter's name? Did you authorize the use of her personal information?" Greg looked utterly defeated. his face pale and slack. He muttered into the microphone a deputy held out, his voice barely audible. I just let Monica handle everything. I told her to take care of the bills. I didn't look at the details. I trusted her. Legally, it was a systemic admission of gross negligence and systemic avoidance of financial responsibility. Emotionally, it was the final confirmation that my father had willingly sacrificed my well-being for his own peace and comfort. The culmination came when the deputies finally moved to secure Tyler. He let out a desperate, childish sound as the cold steel of the handcuffs clicked around his wrists right there in the seating row. The sudden sharp clink echoing through the massive, silenced arena. Monica, seeing her son cuffed, finally went completely ballistic. She lunged forward, hands outstretched, her controlled mask utterly gone. 2 faculty members rushed to hold her back, but she continued to scream, her voice tearing apart with raw fury, projecting one final, self-incriminating message to the entire law school. You ungrateful little traitor, you owe us. Every cent of this was because of you. It was all for you. The last thing I saw as the deputies efficiently escorted Monica and Tyler, both now restrained, out of the arena, was the collective horror on the faces of the graduates and their families. The public unveiling of the fraud was complete. My graduation day was irrevocably ruined, but my future was finally, legally, my own. The ceremony had not merely paused, it had imploded. As Monica and Tyler were escorted away, the arena exploded into a cacophony of rumors, gasps, and furious whispering. Students huddled together, pointing toward the empty seats in the VIP section. The faculty looked pale and shaken, utterly unprepared for a criminal arrest to interrupt the conferral of degrees. The shockwave of the truth was already spreading. Identity theft by her own stepmother and brother. The whispers carried, amplified by the immense hall. The truth, ugly and painful, was finally out, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't fighting a lone, private battle in a darkened kitchen. I was immediately ushered backstage by Amara, who was fielding calls on her phone, and the visibly distraught dean. Catherine, I trust you understand the gravity of what just transpired, the dean began, his voice strained. Amara cut him off smoothly. Dean, Ms. Wade didn't disrupt the ceremony. She inadvertently provided the most compelling and relevant lesson in professional ethics and victims' rights that this law school has seen in decades. She protected herself using the very law she spent 3 years studying. She is the victim here. The validation from Amara and the dean was critical. It shattered the old narrative that I was a difficult person who made scenes. I was a client, a victim, and a future colleague. Meanwhile, the main problem remained seated in the VIP section. Greg. He was not arrested on site, but the court officer had informed him that he was required to appear at the precinct for questioning regarding his knowledge of the fraudulent transactions and the use of his dental practice's network. He found me backstage, his face swollen with terror and self-pity, the picture of a man utterly overwhelmed by the consequences of his own moral cowardice. Katie, you have to talk to them, he pleaded, his hands reaching for me. You have to tell them it's all a misunderstanding. Monica just got confused with the accounts. It's all a domestic matter. Honey, they can't turn it into a felony. You're my daughter. You have to help your dad. His response was entirely centered on his own survival, his own reputation. He didn't ask about the pain in my ribs. He didn't apologize for his silence. And he didn't acknowledge the $180,000 of debt now staining my name. This was the moment I had anticipated, the moment where I had to choose between the promise I made my deceased mother and the promise I made to myself. I looked at him, and for the first time, I felt nothing but cold, clinical distance. I spoke to him as I would to an opposing counsel, with professional finality. Dad, you have a serious legal problem. You co-signed documents, you gave Monica full authority over your finances, and you let her operate a massive fraud scheme from your business location. That's a legal liability, I stated calmly. You need to hire a lawyer immediately. I cannot, and will not, Explain this away as a family misunderstanding. My time as your financial cushion and your emotional scapegoat is over." His mouth opened and closed, realizing that his usual strategy, begging me to be the peacemaker, had utterly failed. He finally saw the impenetrable wall I had built. As Greg stumbled away to make frantic calls, the peripheral family members began to make their presence known. They emerged from the crowd, revealing their true colors in the aftermath of the explosion. A few cousins rushed up, hugging me fiercely, their anger genuine. "Oh, Catherine, we always knew that woman was manipulative. We are so sorry. We'll support you." But then came the others, the ones who prioritized the sanctity of the family unit over the law. "Catherine, darling, this is just so dramatic," whispered Greg's second cousin, adjusting her shawl nervously. "Couldn't you have handled this quietly? Family business stays in the family. Now everyone knows. Think of your poor father's reputation." The audacity was breathtaking. They cared more about the scandal embarrassing them than the fact that their relative was a felon who had financially crippled me. Then, a small, elderly woman, Greg's aunt, one of the kindest members of the extended family, approached me with tears in her eyes. "I have to tell you something, dear," she whispered, taking my hands. "I'm so sorry. A few years ago, I heard Monica bragging at a Christmas dinner that she'd found a way to use your scholarship money for general maintenance instead of tuition. I suspected then she was cheating you, but I was too afraid to speak up. I didn't want to get involved. Please forgive me. Catherine." The confession was a quiet revelation. Monica hadn't operated in a vacuum. She had operated in a silence built by fear and polite avoidance. The conspiracy wasn't just Monica and Tyler. It was the systemic apathy of every adult who chose not to get involved. Standing there, listening to the cacophony of excuses and partial confessions, I felt the last vestige of the dutiful, accommodating daughter drain out of me. The old, conditioned response was to forgive, to minimize the offense, to sacrifice my own pain for the greater peace of the family. But the professional, legal mind I had spent the last 3 years forging rejected that impulse. I was a person worthy of protection, and my safety, both physical and financial, was my number one priority. The dean returned to me, looking marginally calmer. "Catherine, we have cleared the hall of the situation. The student body is restless, but supportive. You have the option to forgo the address, or we can postpone the rest of the ceremony." I looked at the stage, at the microphone, at the spot where Monica had stood, demanding my silence. I thought about all the hours I had spent working late shifts, studying while exhausted, sacrificing my youth, all so she could try to hijack this exact moment. "No," I said, my voice strong. "The ceremony must continue. I will finish my commencement address. I will not let a criminal act, or the perpetrator of it, take this moment from me." With Amara by my side, I walked back toward the stage. The president introduced me again, this time with a tone of profound, heartfelt respect. As I climbed the steps and approached the podium, a stunning thing happened. The entire floor of graduates, 200 of my peers, who knew precisely what I had endured, rose to their feet. Then, the students in the stands, the faculty, and even most of the remaining families, understanding that they were witnessing a profound act of personal courage, followed suit. The applause was deafening, a standing ovation that lasted nearly 2 minutes. It wasn't the polite recognition of the top student, it was the roaring validation of the person who chose justice over family pretense. I looked out at the crowd, no longer seeing suspects or co-conspirators, but a community of witnesses. I waited until the applause finally settled, then adjusted the microphone and finished the last segment of my speech, the part about professional integrity and the responsibility to stand up for one's own truth. I had lost my family, but in that moment, I had found myself. I was a lawyer, and I was free. Weeks later, the raw electric energy of the graduation ceremony was replaced by the cold, sterile stillness of a Mecklenburg County courtroom. This setting, unlike the arena, was designed not for celebration, but for surgical examination and definitive judgment. It was a place where lies were dissected by sworn testimony and emotional debts were settled by statutes. Monica and Tyler sat at the defense table, represented by a pair of expensive, weary-looking public defenders. They were dressed in cheap, ill-fitting suits purchased for the occasion, attempting to project an image of respectable citizens caught in a tragic domestic misunderstanding. I sat with Amara Jensen at the table reserved for the victims and their counsel. I was no longer just the victim. Having passed the bar exam weeks before, a feat accomplished while concurrently preparing my evidence for the prosecution, I was now, officially, an officer of the court. I wore a crisp navy suit, and the only item from my graduation day was the slim, leather portfolio containing the entirety of the evidence I had compiled. The trial was not a prolonged, dramatic affair. The evidence was too overwhelming. The forensic path too clearly marked by the team at Sentinel Ridge Analytics. The judge, efficient and stern, chose to focus not on daily testimony, but on critical slices of evidence that proved systemic, premeditated fraud. A bank loan officer took the stand, nervously describing the chain of forged and digitally altered email confirmations they had received regarding the over $180,000 in loans. He explained that the physical paperwork had been signed by the guarantor, me, and notarized at a third-party office with a notary who was now being investigated for negligence. The officer admitted they had been fooled by the professional presentation of the documents and the impeccable credit score of the guarantor. Next, a forensic data analyst from the district attorney's office presented the IP traces. His testimony was devastatingly objective. He displayed a map showing the geolocation of the loan applications. The $40,000 loan was submitted from the specific, unsecure Wi-Fi network of Greg's dental practice. The $70,000 consolidation loan was submitted from the home IP address. Hours after I had been confirmed to be out of state at a student conference, the data didn't lie. The person using my identity was physically present in the Pierce home or office, while I was demonstrably elsewhere. Finally, Gregory Pierce was called to the stand, not as a co-defendant, but as a material witness for the prosecution. He looked pale, haggard, and utterly ruined. The prosecutor, a sharp young woman named Ms. Hayes, led him gently through the process. "Mr. Pierce, can you confirm that you signed multiple documents, including tax forms and loan guarantees, without reading the contents?" Greg swallowed hard, his voice shaking. "Yes, I can confirm that." "And you allowed your wife, Monica Pierce, full authority to access and manage your daughter, Catherine Wade's personal financial information and mail, including tax documents and loan correspondence?" "I told her to take care of everything. I trusted Monica to handle it," Greg murmured, avoiding eye contact with me. "Ms. Hayes pressed him, her voice kind but relentless. "Why did you avoid looking at the details when you knew the amounts involved were substantial, totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars, and involved your daughter's name?" Greg finally broke. He looked up, his eyes clouded with pathetic self-realization. "I felt uneasy, ma'am. I did, but Monica always told me it was just temporary, that she had it handled, and that I should just trust the family. I chose my own comfort. I chose to believe it was easier to close my eyes and let Monica worry about it than to confront the truth and be the responsible one." His testimony sealed his fate, confirming the charge of willful blindness that enabled the fraud. He had knowingly chosen his convenience over my safety. The final piece of the hearing was the victim impact statement. I walked to the stand, carrying only the small microphone, my own voice calm and level. This was not a moment for catharsis. It was a moment for legal clarity. I looked directly at the judge, ignoring the strained, hateful gaze of Monica and Tyler at the defense table. "Your Honor, I am not here to ask for vengeance or to make an emotional appeal. I am here to define the crime," I began. I recounted the morning of my graduation, not focusing on the prestige, but on the violence. On the day I was scheduled to graduate law school, the defendant, Monica Pierce, physically assaulted me in the hallway, pressing me to sign documents that would have indebted me for nearly $1 million. I paused, letting the severity of the act sink in. But, Your Honor, the punch was not the worst pain. The worst pain was the realization that with Monica, my academic achievement, my professional success, my very identity, it was all just currency. It was a commodity to be traded for money she felt entitled to take. My diploma, in her eyes, was only a key to bigger lines of credit. I shifted my focus, addressing the larger purpose of the prosecution. Money, Your Honor, can be earned back. The debt can be disputed and eventually cleared. But trust, the foundational trust I placed in the people I called family, that is irreparable. I brought this case forward, not out of cheap revenge, but because the law was the final, absolute boundary I was forced to erect when every single emotional and moral boundary was deliberately and repeatedly obliterated. I emphasized the cold, calculated nature of their actions. They operated under the guise of family, using my father's compliance and my mother's promise to exploit my future. The law, in this instance, is not a tool for my personal satisfaction. It is the necessary, final barrier against systematic abuse. The verdict was delivered swiftly and definitively. The judge noted Tyler's history of felony fraud and his attempted flight at the graduation ceremony, stating that his actions showed a clear intent to continue criminal activity. Tyler James Pierce was sentenced to substantial jail time for multiple counts of fraud and a serious violation of his existing probation. Monica Elaine Pierce received the harshest sentence. The judge emphasized the breach of trust inherent in her crime, specifically calling out her manipulation of her position as a pseudo-maternal figure to coerce and exploit the victim. Monica was sentenced to years in state prison, with a mandatory order for full restitution of the over $180,000 stolen from my name, a restitution she would likely never be able to fully pay, but which served as the official acknowledgement of the debt. Greg, due to his consistent claim of ignorance and his lack of direct participation in the forgery, avoided prison. His sentence was focused on reformation, extensive probation, mandatory attendance at financial management counseling, and a formal judicial finding that his willful blindness and chronic financial irresponsibility had directly enabled the commission of felony fraud. As the court officers moved in to escort Monica and Tyler away, the room was silent. Monica, her face drawn and tear-streaked, looked back one last time. Her eyes searched mine, not with hate, but with an expectation, an unspoken demand for the forgiveness that had always saved her before. I met her gaze. I did not smile. I did not cry. My eyes held only a quiet, absolute finality. It was the look of a person who had finally, truly, broken free. There was no pity, only a resolute calm that signaled the end of her power over me. The case was closed. The conflict was resolved, not through an unending cycle of emotional trauma, but through the decisive, clean cut of the legal system. I walked out of the courtroom beside Amara, the bright midday sun of Charlotte streaming down onto the courthouse steps. I carried my legal portfolio in one hand, and draped over the other was the heavy black fabric of my academic gown, still bearing the faint indentations of the tiny voice recorder. My graduation ceremony had been stolen, replacing a party with a police escort, but what I gained was far more valuable than a reception. I gained a clean slate, a legal shield, and the profound, stabilizing feeling of self-possession. I had chosen myself over the false comfort of family, and the freedom felt absolute. And that is where our story ends. Thank you so much for listening to Catherine's journey. If you're enjoying these stories of resilience and legal victory, let us know in the comments where you are listening from so we can all connect and share our thoughts. Please remember to subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help ensure this story of finding justice is heard by even more people. Weeks later, the raw electric energy of the graduation ceremony was replaced by the cold, sterile stillness of a Mecklenburg County courtroom. This setting, unlike the arena, was designed not for celebration, but for surgical examination and definitive judgment. It was a place where lies were dissected by sworn testimony and emotional debts were settled by statutes. Monica and Tyler sat at the defense table, represented by a pair of expensive, weary-looking public defenders. They were dressed in cheap, ill-fitting suits purchased for the occasion, attempting to project an image of respectable citizens caught in a tragic domestic misunderstanding. I sat with Amara Jensen at the table reserved for the victims and their counsel. I was no longer just the victim, having passed the bar exam weeks before, a feat accomplished while concurrently preparing my evidence for the prosecution. I was now, officially, an officer of the court. I wore a crisp navy suit, and the only item from my graduation day was the slim, leather portfolio containing the entirety of the evidence I had compiled. The trial was not a prolonged, dramatic affair. The evidence was too overwhelming, the forensic path too clearly marked by the team at Sentinel Ridge Analytics. The judge, efficient and stern, chose to focus not on daily testimony, but on critical slices of evidence that proved systemic, premeditated fraud. A bank loan officer took the stand, nervously describing the chain of forged and digitally altered email confirmations they had received regarding the over $180,000 in loans. He explained that the physical paperwork had been signed by the guarantor, me, and notarized at a third-party office with a notary who was now being investigated for negligence. The officer admitted they had been fooled by the professional presentation of the documents and the impeccable credit score of the guarantor. Next, a forensic data analyst from the district attorney's office presented the IP traces. His testimony was devastatingly objective. He displayed a map showing the geolocation of the loan applications. The $40,000 loan was submitted from the specific, unsecure Wi-Fi network of Greg's dental practice. The $70,000 consolidation loan was submitted from the home IP address. Hours after I had been confirmed to be out of state at a student conference, the data didn't lie. The person using my identity was physically present in the Pierce home or office while I was demonstrably elsewhere. Finally, Gregory Pierce was called to the stand, not as a co-defendant, but as a material witness for the prosecution. He looked pale, haggard, and utterly ruined. The prosecutor, a sharp young woman named Ms. Hayes, led him gently through the process. Mr. Pierce, can you confirm that you signed multiple documents, including tax forms and loan guarantees, without reading the contents? Greg swallowed hard, his voice shaking. Yes, I can confirm that. And you allowed your wife, Monica Pierce, full authority to access and manage your daughter, Catherine Wade's personal financial information and mail, including tax documents and loan correspondence? I told her to take care of everything. I trusted Monica to handle it. Greg murmured, avoiding eye contact with me. Ms. Hayes pressed him, her voice kind but relentless. Why did you avoid looking at the details when you knew the amounts involved were substantial, totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars, and involved your daughter's name? Greg finally broke. He looked up, his eyes clouded with pathetic self-realization. I felt uneasy, ma'am. I did. But Monica always told me it was just temporary, that she had it handled, and that I should just trust the family. I chose my own comfort. I chose to believe it was easier to close my eyes and let Monica worry about it than to confront the truth and be the responsible one. His testimony sealed his fate, confirming the charge of willful blindness that enabled the fraud. He had knowingly chosen his convenience over my safety. The final piece of the hearing was the victim impact statement. I walked to the stand, carrying only the small microphone, my own voice calm and level. This was not a moment for catharsis. It was a moment for legal clarity. I looked directly at the judge, ignoring the strained, hateful gaze of Monica and Tyler at the defense table. Your Honor, I am not here to ask for vengeance or to make an emotional appeal. I am here to define the crime. I began. I recounted the morning of my graduation, not focusing on the prestige, but on the violence. On the day I was scheduled to graduate law school, the defendant, Monica Pierce, physically assaulted me in the hallway, pressing me to sign documents that would have indebted me for nearly $1 million. I paused, letting the severity of the act sink in. But, Your Honor, the punch was not the worst pain. The worst pain was the realization that with Monica, my academic achievement, my professional success, my very identity, it was all just currency. It was a commodity to be traded for money she felt entitled to take. My diploma, in her eyes, was only a key to bigger lines of credit. I shifted my focus, addressing the larger purpose of the prosecution. Money, Your Honor, can be earned back. The debt can be disputed and eventually cleared. But trust, the foundational trust I placed in the people I called family, that is irreparable. I brought this case forward, not out of cheap revenge, but because the law was the final, absolute boundary I was forced to erect when every single emotional and moral boundary was deliberately and repeatedly obliterated. I emphasized the cold, calculated nature of their actions. They operated under the guise of family, using my father's compliance and my mother's promise to exploit my future. The law, in this instance, is not a tool for my personal satisfaction. It is the final barrier against systematic abuse. The verdict was delivered swiftly and definitively. The judge noted Tyler's history of felony fraud and his attempted flight at the graduation ceremony, stating that his actions showed a clear intent to continue criminal activity. Tyler James Pierce was sentenced to substantial jail time for multiple counts of fraud and a serious violation of his existing probation. Monica Elaine Pierce received the harshest sentence. The judge emphasized the breach of trust inherent in her crime, specifically calling out her manipulation of her position as a pseudo-maternal figure to coerce and exploit the victim. Monica was sentenced to years in state prison, with a mandatory order for full restitution of the over $180,000 stolen from my name, a restitution she would likely never be able to fully pay, but which served as the official acknowledgement of the debt. Greg, due to his consistent claim of ignorance and his lack of direct participation in the forgery, avoided prison. His sentence was focused on reformation, extensive probation, mandatory attendance at financial management counseling, and a formal judicial finding that his willful blindness and chronic financial irresponsibility had directly enabled the commission of felony fraud. As the court officers moved in to escort Monica and Tyler away, the room was silent. Monica, her face drawn and tear-streaked, looked back one last time. Her eyes searched mine, not with hate, but with an expectation, an unspoken demand for the forgiveness that had always saved her before. I met her gaze. I did not smile. I did not cry. My eyes held only a quiet, absolute finality. It was the look of a person who had finally, truly, broken free. There was no pity, only a resolute calm that signaled the end of her power over me. The case was closed. The conflict was resolved, not through an unending cycle of emotional trauma, but through the decisive, clean cut of the legal system. I walked out of the courtroom beside Amara, the bright midday sun of Charlotte streaming down onto the courthouse steps. I carried my legal portfolio in one hand, and draped over the other was the heavy black fabric of my academic gown, still bearing the faint indentations of the tiny voice recorder. My graduation ceremony had been stolen, replacing a party with a police escort, but what I gained was far more valuable than a reception. I gained a clean slate, a legal shield, and the profound, stabilizing feeling of self-possession. I had chosen myself over the false comfort of family, and the freedom felt absolute. And that is where our story ends. Thank you so much for listening to Catherine's journey. If you're enjoying these stories of resilience and legal victory, let us know in the comments where you are listening from so we can all connect and share our thoughts. Please remember to subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help ensure this story of finding justice is heard by even more people.